Hello, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome today to the panel discussion that we have on the sideline of the World Economic Forum and the Open Forum. Our discussion today, or the topic of our panel, is about advancing the global sustainability agenda. And we have our esteemed panelists that I'll be introducing in a few minutes. So today we are at a pivotal moment in our global journey towards sustainability, as we face environmental degradation, climate change, and resource scarcity. The imperative for actions has never been stronger. Globally, we lose forests covering an area the size of UK annually. The cities emit about 70% of total carbon dioxide. Our discussions today will focus on how technology, innovation, and collaboration can harness to transform the world of sustainability to a more sustainable future. We are joined with our distinguished panelists who are at the forefront for these efforts. So let me quickly give a quick introduction of our esteemed panelists, and let me start with His Excellency Dr. Munir Al-Dessouqi, President of King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. Her Highness Princess Masha'al Al-Sha'lan, co-founder of Aeon Collective. Engineer Omar Najjar, the Deputy CEO of MISC Foundation. Seneca Kottom, who is the Head of Sustainability of Al-Shayr Group in Kuwait. And Johnny Ayoub, who is a partner, India, Middle East, and Africa of Climate and Sustainability in Oliver Wyman. So I'll do a quick questions for this round of our session. And please, I would request our panelists to stick to 7 minutes for their interventions. And I'll start with His Excellency, Dr. Munir. So, Doctor, if you can also very quickly discuss the role of science and technology in driving sustainable development globally, and the contributions of King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology in this realm.
Thank you, Yara. Good morning, everyone. I don't think this is a 7-minute conversation, but I'll try to keep this brief. Welcome to Riyadh for those of you that it's your first time being here. We tried to make it rain so you get a sustainable experience, so hopefully you enjoyed the rain yesterday. But a lot of countries have committed to net zero commitments, and if we look at what's required to make this possible, maybe 50% of the technologies that are necessary to do so have not been invented yet, or haven't been invented but have not been scaled up in the necessary way. So with that, I think science and technology, and I am a little bit biased, is probably the core of achieving what we need to do to meet these goals. And there's a lot that needs to happen, whether from government or from the private sector, and an integration role that needs to take place. And the challenge, as I see it, is that a lot of these technologies are still not proven to be viable, so investors don't want to invest in them until they can understand the results. They're still at basic science levels. So the role of government to scale them up, to provide pilots and prototypes, becomes very important in these cases. And a lot of this has been happening in the kingdom over the past few years. So I'll give some examples. We've used technology to demonstrate how we can provide desalination based on renewable energy in a city called Al-Khafji, where their water comes entirely from a renewable energy plant today that we launched a couple of years ago. But the kingdom has been pushing towards bringing down the cost of using these types of technologies, achieving the lowest tariff in renewable energy in the world in 2017, the lowest tariff in wind energy in 2019, and so on in terms of pilots. But of course, basic science is also important. We need to keep investing in technologies that don't exist today and making sure that they can become viable, and they are revolutionary in a way. So we've been working with partners around the world. One, for example, is a Saudi-American scientist in UC Berkeley that created a new type of material called metal organic frameworks that has a very high porosity to store different types of materials, and you can create your own kind of molecules to capture what you want to capture. So we started with capturing water from the environment. It was lab grade in the beginning, but then started to scale up to 30 liters a day can be achieved, but in the desert, to capture water purely from the environment. Very nice technology. Needs to be scaled up still further, so we're still looking at government and private sector stakeholders to invest in these kind of technologies to make them commercially available, especially in countries like Africa. But There are other applications as well, and here's where it got interesting. With the revolution in AI, ChatGPT type of technologies coming up, chemists that usually don't use AI and they don't know how to program in these domains started using ChatGPT because of its interface, and we created lab research assistants for them that really accelerated discovery in new materials, brought it down from a 2-year cycle to a 1-month cycle, but also with 6x better performance. So we're starting to see really cutting-edge breakthroughs coming up, and that's where we're getting very excited. So we managed to actually come up with a new material that can capture carbon. And this has become exciting. We've seen and demonstrated that it can be very sustainable and very reliable, and you don't see fluctuations that we used to see in previous material. So we can actually go commercial with this very soon. This was published also in collaboration with UC Berkeley and Science. But back to demonstrations, we're very excited that in the Kingdom today there are more than 80 initiatives taking place with a budget of over $180 billion to demonstrate these technologies and what they can do. And one of the biggest, I would say, green hydrogen production facilities being built in the world is being built in the Kingdom today, over a 300 square kilometer space that would produce roughly 600 tons of green hydrogen per day. So we're very excited about these kind of initiatives. There's still a lot more that can be done, of course, but it's that integration between government, academia, and the private sector to demonstrate the kind of pilots, the scale-ups that we want to do is where I think things are getting very exciting. And I'll stop here, but I still have more I can say on this topic.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think we've heard a little bit on the important role of government to really enable the private sector and other organizations in terms of investment, the push and the policies that are being set to really come up with these creative technologies and innovation to scale up and progress and ensure that we are growing in sustainable development and addressing these solutions. So maybe I'll move to Her Highness Masha'al Al-Sha'lan. In what ways can Aeon Collective and similar organizations facilitate the development of policies that are not only to drive innovation and sustainability, but also can ensure that those policies are being implemented and grounded in local realities?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Tiara. And first of all, thank you, Your Excellency, for giving us a really good overview about the action that's happening here on the ground, especially from the decarbonization journey, which I think for a lot of external players, it might not be as seen or visible. But welcome to Saudi. In this place, we walk the talk, and we walk hand in hand with others to help scale up and deploy. To your point, it's not sometimes the viability of certain technologies, but rather the buy-in that this thing is there, that it's ready, and what it takes to move things beyond the TRL levels, right? The scale-up and duplication and replication is not as easy as one likes to think it is in a lot of these straightforward graphics. So it takes all of a system, all of the world to get things rolling from point A to point B. So if you may allow me, and Yara, please, I second His Excellency's point. If I go above time, which I have the tendency to do so, do stop me. But to begin, we've established Aeon Collective first and foremost as a waqf. We chose the structure of a waqf, knowing that first and foremost it's one of the oldest legal structures around the world, very much in line with our own heritage and who we are as a people. But I think that to a certain extent, the efficiency and the effectiveness of awqaf as a structure have not really been taken to where we need it to be within this century, within a lot of the challenges that we're trying to face in the Kingdom and around the world. If I may, you mentioned Al-Khafji as well, Your Excellency, and say a quick story, personal story about that. What really got me engaged into the space overall was the first Gulf War. As a young child, in 1991, I think I was around 5 years old. The moment that the war had ended, we had to stay in Riyadh and witness everything that came along with it, the potential of chemical warfare, with the thinking that if we die together. And my grandfather was here, so we did not leave an inch. We stayed here for the bulk of the time, keeping in mind as well that as we continue to progress within these spaces, how do we do it in a way that allows us to go beyond where the rest of the world is taking us to? And how do we not be reactive to a lot of the challenges that we're facing? So as soon as the war ended, the first thing that we did was go to the desert, which is very much speaking to the spirit of my grandfather. That's where we went as an asthmatic child to recuperate. And I have to tell you, I did very much so. But the second thing was to go to Al-Khafji. And when we went there, for those of you that have read the history or know or have lived it, you know that there were massive oil spills that happened within the Gulf. So one of my earliest memories dipping my foot in the sea was seeing these big oil blobs touching our own shorelines and thinking that as I'm trying to think of what to do, obviously nothing as a 6-year-old, but I knew that my grandfather and my father and others were trying to save as many animals as possible, a lot of the birds that were stuck in some of those oil spills. So having that core responsibility that not only spoke to SDGs or global frameworks, which we are very happy to be part in the process of making up, but very much speaks to who we are as a people and where do we move and transition from there on. Obviously, not to touch too much on history, but to talk about the current realities, where we've chosen to set up is when you're talking about policy, it has to be very much informed by science. It has to be very much informed in something that allows the policymaker to make such decisions. Another really good encounter that I had with CACS during COVID was the complex decision-making body. And honestly, that's when I started to take pride and know what we're capable of as a country. Where I was thinking that a lot of these decisions were being made ad hoc, I was surprised to see really sophisticated AI models that were allowing the government to decide which neighborhoods to close, what streets to keep open, and how do you manage a really tough situation. So for that, we're really grateful and for the continued work that you're doing at CACS. But that sense of ownership of what our trajectory looks like, understanding what would the decarbonization journey look like for the kingdom, and how would we approach it in a way that's very much in alignment with our own sets of endowments. This is the headspace in which we started to formulate and started to work. From our side, understanding what are our assets, having as much information and data as possible was really important. And we started working with the Ministry of Energy around the formulation of the circular carbon economy, which became our main pathway to dealing with these issues. Understanding what would a net zero pathway look like for the kingdom. Honestly, and I hope that this is not seen as me being a Saudi, but I very much believe that this pragmatism that's deeply embedded into how we're dealing with the decarbonization journey will have massive potential positive impacts towards the rest of the world. Because we're not looking at it in a political lens, but rather, what can we do today? What can we scale today? And how can we do it in a way that's together, that's not antagonizing one approach or one color of hydrogen, but rather saying, what's really at stake? Are we thinking about the emissions? And are we thinking about a lot of these issues in a way that does not antagonize us and puts us in camps of us versus them, but rather the we that we need to harness to get us to a safer space of operation? And last but definitely not least, and this touches a little bit on the talk that we were discussing in the back, which is walking the talk. And for that to really happen, we need to understand the basics of the science that in a lot of ways the rest of the world won't be able to do on our behalf. At least from our team's side, and I recognize my colleagues here in the room, we tended to try to aggregate multidisciplinarians by nature, because having people that had expertise in different disciplines was not enough. Where it really mattered was in the gray zone and the connecting tissue between these issues to enable us to navigate these operating spaces in a safe way. So when we're talking about urbanism and urban development and regeneration, that's a massive area of focus. Regreening and rewilding things from the strategies of cheetahs to other animals is definitely an area that we're looking at. What does it mean for us to look at our built environment, and what do our standards look like for our region? We're having a brilliant talk with one of our colleagues today that's leading one of the museums in the kingdom. And one of the things that people don't necessarily think about when they're putting these strategies is what does that look like for a museum setting? And when we're looking at a museum setting, what's the mechanism that will allow them to host certain collections, be able to abide by the global norms, but also very much be able to operate as a well-functioning institution within this place. I'll end with the last example of what we've done last year, and we're hoping to replicate this year, inshallah, with COP16 happening in the kingdom. Last year, we decided we don't have enough information about the impacts of a 3-degree world on Saudi Arabia. We have really good, strong collaborations with a core university in the kingdom, KAUST, one of the best science and technology universities. The other was a very famous, beautiful campus as well, with Hadid. CAPSARC as a main think tank that looks at the issues of policy around energy. So what we've done was to say, let's sit together and figure out the impacts of a 3-degree world on Saudi Arabia. That resulted in a report titled Climate Futures, which we were able to speak and iterate on and be able to build, let's say, policy decisions from some of our discussions with the Saudi Space Agency of what needs to go up in those satellites to be able to monitor the types of actions and policies that need to be deployed on the ground. To in other places, what type of innovation should we be growing in country, as opposed to continuing to export things that have been greatly done to date by institutions like CACS and others. How do we capitalize them and really move the needle towards capturing, let's say, the value that's inherent to a lot of these things on that front? But where it's lacking, and if we're being completely honest and transparent, is how do you translate a lot of these actions on the urban scale? When it came to that, not enough information, not enough data, and this is what's getting us right now to move for the next iteration to come up with a climate dashboard where all of the different players, all of the different stakeholders in Kingdom can contribute to. So as opposed to the work where you might bring in a certain team, come up with a model, and then keep it in your back pocket, rather have it as a national level asset that everyone can contribute to and everyone can benefit from. So in a sense, I'll reiterate my welcome to those of you that are visiting Saudi Arabia, and I'm hoping you're getting a sense of the sensibility of the Bedouin that's walking the talk. But to those of you that are here that are from Saudi, it's just a reminder that as we're learning about a lot of these frameworks, we have to remember and remind ourselves of who we were and how can we build all of these facets in alignment with our points of strengths, rather than just continue to engage with the rest of the world. Because on both cases, we'll be more respected in how we're being approached by the rest of the world. We'll be more effective as a partner as we're channeling all of these efforts through. And it's in that sense that I think most effective policymaking goes through the active action of harmonizing, being a really good conductor in a sense, where you're hitting the right kind of notes and not getting lost in the noise. Thank you, Yara.
Thank you very much. These are very great points, and especially the ones that are related to how can we really make sure that we have good quality data to really drive the discussion on a center of government level and to really drive the policy decision-making processes. And on the last point that you mentioned on partnership, I think that's also key, because we cannot really achieve sustainability, the government or the private sector alone. Every single person, every single individual and institution needs to play a key role, which takes me to our third panelist, Engineer Omar. So if you can describe also some of the approaches that are being utilized in the development of capabilities among young leaders and entrepreneurs to drive sustainability.
Thank you, everyone. The MISC Foundation helped around 6 million people in the past 10 years, and we do that with a very practical approach. We choose to partner with employers rather than universities and institutions to develop our programs, to basically be very practical, very current to the needs of those employers and institutions, and develop the young people, whether they're at an early stage of their lives, of finding their own careers, or maybe later where they need to maybe sit on a table of a decision-making. And we help them in a very practical approach. So the Leaders 2030 Leaders Program, for example, we have our practicality is to immerse them into the Vision 2030 through a capstone project. So they basically work with one of the real life problems to solve either sustainability issues, energy, healthcare, and or tourism, or any of these big agendas that the Kingdom is looking for. So in general, we basically get into very practical, very functional in our programs, and we deliver these programs also through very practical approaches like mentorship, workshops, immersive learning, and so on. This is on the side of capacity building, but we also walk the talk, as Your Highness said, when it comes to building MISC City. We have a district of 3 million square meter that we're building closer to Riyadh. Hopefully it's calmer than the usual Riyadh, more artistic than the usual Riyadh. But we also care about the sustainability in terms of the global standards of urban development. So we, at this stage, we're at a gold standard of the urban development. So we do capacity building. We do the development of youth. We walk the talk when it comes to our own projects, And we also advocate for sustainability and global agenda items through our young individuals. We put them into in stages like this, in Davos, in many other conferences around the world, to basically advocate for agendas related to important matters for the kingdom and for youth.
Thank you so much. And of course, when we actually encourage the youth to really advocate for sustainability, is starting off by spreading the awareness and the knowledge of why is it really important, to really get them engaged, to understand what are the critical issues that we face and what is the real need for them to take some kind of action. And that also supports when it comes to the private sector, once we create these awareness campaigns around creating a consumer demand. And maybe I'll also now cover with Seneca, our fourth panelist, around as you are the head of sustainability in a retail sector and a leading retail sector of Al Shaya Group, how do you perceive the role of private sector organizations in driving these sustainability initiatives, especially in the context of retail and consumers?
So first, let me just describe our organization, because a lot of people may not have heard of it who are coming from outside of this region. Al Shaya Group is a family-owned business that's based out of Kuwait. We are franchise and license operators of over 70 different brands, some of your favorite brands that you guys know, in this region. We're a large organization with 50,000 plus employees, and we operate in 17 countries, and we have over 4,000, almost 5,000 stores. So we're a huge organization. And as such, we feel it's our responsibility to take responsibility for the waste that we put into this world, our operations, to make sure that we're more sustainable. And as organizations and as retailers, there are over 42 million tons of consumer waste that are thrown away every year. So this is one of the primary focus areas for our business and should be for most retail business. But how we address that is really three pillars. The first is partnerships with governments. Governments don't understand every single sector that operates in their country. So it's important for us to take a step forward and advise our governments and work with our governments to support them in reaching their goals. Vision 2030 can't be reached by the government alone. Each and every one of us, like we've mentioned, we all have to take part. And as businesses, we have the resources, we have the capacity, and we understand how our businesses work, so we need to help the governments understand that. Also, we are a business of waste, and we need to make sure that we're working with everyone in our value chain to reduce the amount of waste that we're producing. So making active partnerships with different sectors, waste sector, packaging sector, and every sector that touches our business is one of the things that we do on a regular basis, and I'll give you an example. We recently completed a pilot in UAE for waste reduction. We partnered with our mall. We partnered with a technology company for tracking of waste so that we could show where the waste was going in our waste stream. We partnered with recycling and waste management companies. And fundamentally, we partnered with our packaging company. So what we were able to do is create our own circular economy, and we were able to reduce our waste by 40%. Now, what that translates into is that we want to expand that project, because we realize that by doing that, we actually can create a new revenue stream, because that waste is being sold to our packaging provider. We're creating new packaging for ourselves, but because we're selling the waste to the recycling company, we have the potential of over $1 million in revenue if we expand this program. So by partnering, we would not have known that had we not brought together all of these different stakeholders into one place to see how we could create value for each other. So it's really important in the retail sector that we really identify who our partners are in every single sector, and we work together to find solutions that work for all of us and for the economies that we are in. And finally, the most important part of our business is our customer. That's the bedrock of what we do, is our customer. And it's important for us to, as retailers, we need to bring our customers along the sustainability journey with us. They need to understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and how it benefits them. Now, BCG did a study in the Gulf of consumer sentiment around sustainability in, I think, 2021. And what they found is that over 75% of people in the GCC, and I'm talking about GCC locals, not expats, they understand climate change. They want to do something about climate change, but what they don't know is how to do it. And that's where the retail sector comes into play. We have the ability to help them understand and learn what it is they can do. And we can do that through education. We can bring them products. We can bring them the products that are more sustainable. Having those in our stores will help overall sustainability in our countries. And then finally, we need to reward them. We need to reward the behavior that we want to see. And we have a very, very big loyalty program at Ashaya, and we use that to incentivize our customers to bring back their textiles, their old textiles, so that we can recycle them for them. Bring back old packaging for cosmetics. We take those things back and we recycle them. But we incentivize our customers to keep doing that over and over again until it becomes a habit. But it is within the retail sector. We have to do our part to make sure that our customers are more sustainable.
Thank you. Definitely incentivizing them is going to try to create that demand and start understanding how can we really shift, even though we're not using the traditional way of retail sector or any other sector, but creating these innovative solutions to make the consumers understand how are we really transforming towards a sustainable future as well. And maybe lastly, on this round of questions, so Johnny, from your perspective, what are some strategies that can cities adopt to address climate change while promoting economic growth?
That's another quite broad question. So first, maybe an intro about the role of cities. So cities play a pivotal role in driving economic growth. But they also play an important role in fighting climate change and in preserving and restoring biodiversity. So looking at some stats, so cities cover around 5% of the global, the Earth's surface, but their impact on the economy basically is much more. So they basically contribute to more than 80% of the global GDP. They host today around 55% of the global population, but they also consume around 2/3 of the energy that we're consuming, and they account for more than 70% of emissions. So small surface, very large impact to be addressed. But also cities also depend significantly on nature. So based on research by the World Economic Forum, 44% of the GDP generated by cities globally is at potential risk of disruption due to loss of nature. So pollution, decreasing resources, and natural catastrophes, they put 44% of this GDP generated by cities at risk. So that's where cities kind of play an important role in ensuring their sustainability and have a broader role also in kind of addressing the issues of sustainability globally. Now, what's the most important point, at least for me, to kind of address this? I would say that you need to develop integrated strategies for cities that would take socioeconomic development into account and growth, but also integrate environmental and climate considerations into account, leading eventually to tangible commitments that would achieve basically the objectives, whether it's at the level of a nation or global objectives. And to develop those strategies, I would say that there are 3 important points. So The first one, and this is where I think data was mentioned before, so it's important to kind of understand the impact on dependencies of a given city on nature and climate, understand the related risks and opportunity that this might present, opportunities and risks for public health, quality of life, economic growth, and resiliency in broader terms. And there are, I think, multiple frameworks that can be used to kind of analyze impact, dependencies, risks, opportunities, and those can be customized to get something pragmatic for a given city. The second important point, I would say, it's about embedding natural capital into financial and economic decision making. So in the past, when we evaluate different programs, let's say greening program or other programs, looking at the costs and benefits, focus has been mostly on economics, GDP contribution, job creation, and I think it's important here to kind of quantify and embed within this cost-benefit analysis the value, economic and financial value of the resources and economic services that we're either using or developing through those programs. And that would kind of help have more informed decision on different programs, different actions. Third point, I think, in general, which is also kind of important, it's when you're developing a strategy, and that, again, that's kind of the number one priority, whether it's for an existing city or for a new city, it's always important to keep in mind it's better to prevent and kind of design sustainable solutions than actually eventually retrofit and upgrade later on. So, and I think that's a third important element that we have seen in working with some of the municipalities in the region. Now, moving beyond the strategy, beyond kind of how to design the strategy to what do we see as common topics that are being addressed. So there are many, I'll kind of just cover the main ones, but first one is about integrating environmental and public health into land use and into master planning. So when you're putting the blueprint for how the city is gonna evolve in the future, account for climate adaptation potential requirements, green spaces, avoiding potentially urban heat islands, which that would kind of create pollution for communities. So I think that integration is super critical. The second one, which is kind of one of the most cost-effective measure, is demand management, whether it's for power or for water. Very low cost, very high impact. 20-30% of your emissions can be reduced at the level of a city. The obvious one that you probably all are aware of is about shifting to renewables and basically also designing infrastructure that would take into account climate adaptation and the greening aspects that are required for mitigation. Big topic at the level of city is also greening the building stock. And it's quite, if you're talking about population increasing, population in cities increasing from 55% to around 75% by 2050. So there's a lot of new buildings that are gonna pop up in the coming years. So building codes will be really critical, reviewing those and making sure that they address the greening aspects. But then there is the other more difficult, I think, journey into greening the existing building stocks through retrofitting. And there are multiple programs, multiple best practices globally that can be leveraged. Another important point for cities is urban mobility. So reducing pollution, reducing time, and making sure that you're reducing emissions at the level of the city. And maybe last but not least, circularity and creating local loop economies. So I think Her Royal Highness mentioned some examples of circular economies, but there are many, and from waste to resources, so diverting waste from landfills, reusing it to create biofuels, energy, recycled material for construction, designing urban spaces and buildings that can be repurposed rather than eventually demolished. And I believe desalination was mentioned. So an example is kind of recent NEOM initiative to kind of use the brine from seawater desalination as a construction material as a new initiative. So I would say these are kind of key actions. Last but not least, I think greening. Planting trees, ensuring there are ecological corridors for biodiversity, also promoting urban agriculture. I think these are all initiatives that are part already of the Saudi Green Initiative today, but can be promoted also further in other countries, other regions, as key measures to address biodiversity and offset basically emissions. So I think that's a quick summary.
Thank you, Johnny. So it's clear that whether it's through science, whether it's through strategy, empowering youth, or transforming business practices, that the path towards sustainability is diverse and it requires interconnectedness. So let's maybe delve deeper into our second session. So maybe I'll come back to you, Your Excellency. Could you elaborate on the specific scientific and technological innovations that are prioritized by Saudi Arabia to address environmental challenges and promote sustainability?
Thank you. So we heard a lot of statistics that seem to be quite challenging. And if we look at water and agriculture, for example, agriculture accounts for roughly 70% of freshwater consumption around the world today. And with urbanization, with food security, there are quite a few challenges that are coming about. Technology and digital tools, they can play a very important role in solving for increasing efficiency and solving for some of these problems. So it doesn't always have to be a very scientific solution. Sometimes there are solutions that we can provide that are maybe less complicated, and I'll give a couple of examples. One we've done to solve our underground water reservoir consumption in the kingdom, where the Ministry of Environment and Water was estimating that we're consuming roughly 17 billion cubic meters of water per year from these underground reservoirs for agriculture, sometimes for feed farming, and they wanted to minimize that consumption because this is a very scarce and important resource for the kingdom. So, of course, Saudi Arabia is very big. We have massive farming fields and mountains. It's very difficult to control and monitor such spaces. So we've implemented tools that are based on digital technologies that really required no invention. We didn't invent or break any new scientific principles. We just used existing tools, satellite images through a network that we capture, image processing and AI, and at a very low cost managed to build a platform that the ministry launched a couple of years ago that the majority of our cost went into the feedback loop that we had to put for people to actually visit these farms and validate what our AI algorithms were claiming to see from space. But within a very short period, we launched a platform that can watch the entire kingdom from space, give a quarterly report to the ministry of what we think farmers are doing and what maybe should be changed. But actually, we started seeing insights that help the farmers. So we can actually tell them the health of what they're growing. We can see if a nozzle is blocked all the way from space. We can give that kind of feedback to them. And within the first year of launching this platform, we saved an estimate of 9 billion cubic meters of underground reservoir water consumption. So just think about the power of using such tools and bringing those into sustainability. So we started thinking, what else can we do? Of course, we heard a lot about the solar panels that are being installed all over the kingdom. What's happening with urbanization? Where is all the food going to be grown? Where are the crops going to be grown? Think about bringing agri-tech into the renewable energy domain, into solar panels. So if we're growing plants or crops under panels in the same fields, the panels, of course, suffer from heat. The efficiency of a solar panel will go down. So if you have plants around the solar panels bringing down the temperature, you're actually increasing the efficiency of those solar panels, which, by the way, you need to wash because if they get dusty, the efficiency also goes down. So we did work on dust repellent coatings to put on the panels that brought down the cleaning cost by 30%, but it wasn't enough. You still need to wash. So when you're washing these panels, that water is being wasted. Now it can go back into the plants that are being grown under these panels and reused again. And finally, you have the big space that you're losing that also shades these plants and increases the health of the crops we have. So simple kind of innovations that can be implemented, which led us to thinking that we shouldn't be coming up with these ideas. They're great opportunities for the private sector and especially the startup community to pick this up. So the Council of Ministers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia approved under Vision 2030 just last year an open access policy to all publicly funded research infrastructure that gives access to our advanced labs, to the data that comes out of these labs, to the startup community, to the research community, to the private sector, to create value from this data. And we've launched a deep tech incubator at my organization. It's called The Garage. It was an old parking building that used to fit 480 cars. Now it fits up to 300 companies. But the real advantage is that it's walking distance from 100 labs. So I see one of our founders sitting back there. He created a company that can optimally place solar panels on your rooftops for optimal efficiency. He called it Optimal PV. It uses 2 satellite images to render a 3D map of a neighborhood. And with a click of a button, using AI, tell you how to put your panels for optimal efficiency. We've seen a lot of ideas like that coming up, so we got excited about creating accelerators dedicated to agri-tech. We have a collaboration with the World Economic Forum on AI for agriculture. This is in our Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which brings together the private sector, the academia, and industry to see if we implement such technologies, what kind of regulations do we need to accelerate, what kind of policies are missing that need to be introduced. So we introduced an agri-tech accelerator. We've introduced also a climate tech accelerator. And there's one that is in collaboration with our Ministry of Water called Sumbula, which I invite you all to visit. It's at our garage as well. And we had a prize dedicated to food tech and food security and agriculture called the Marai Scientific Prize, which now has gone through a revamp for an international version that will be announced very soon, that will bring together entrepreneurs or innovators or scientists from around the world to provide cutting-edge solutions to climate tech and food tech to accelerate bringing some of these technologies to market.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Very good examples, and it touches upon so many of the different topics that were discussed, from policies, from the different initiatives, and the partnerships that exist today. Your Highness, from your extensive experience in strategic consulting, how can organizations like Aon Collective leverage their unique multidisciplinary approaches to strengthen global advocacy for sustainability, and what roles can they play in leading thought leadership to shape global sustainability agendas effectively? Your Highness, before you get into that, I think if you can keep it very short, because we want to also give it an opportunity for the audience to ask some questions.
Tug your ear if I go over. Keep an eye there. From our side, for Aon Collective, honestly, when we were thinking about the complexity of the system with which one needs to deal, because, I mean, it's nice to listen to statistics that oversimplify the narrative, but in reality, there are 4 main building blocks that we need to take quite seriously. The first is the massive suffering that we're seeing within our biome. So things that need to be combating the massive biodiversity loss that's happening is a very important component. The second, that touches on everything, and I think we spoke about at length, which are issues around our atmosphere. I think mainly the climate issue is one of them, but also issues around ozone, unintended consequences, not to get too technical. If we stop coal emitting outfits that are also giving us a little bit of these reflecting particles into the atmosphere, there might be some unintended consequences that might emerge as we're trying to solve for some of these issues. So we have to think about in a comprehensive manner. And importantly, sustainable cultures. What does it mean to ensure that for every single individual, there's the active opportunity to repair the planet, and through that action, be able to make a decent living, be able to make security for his current needs, but also to future generations, and be able to do it in a way that's replicable, that's scalable, and that applies to the diversity of issues that we're facing across the world. To keep in mind that in Saudi, we might be taking the official classification of a developing country, but the development that's happening in Kingdom cannot be compared to equally some neighboring countries within our corner of the world. So having that mindfulness of how do you approach this issue of planetary repair becomes extremely important. And for us, there are three main components, and I'll try to be very brief with them, that you need to take into consideration. The first is connect, the second is innovate, and the third is replicate. I'll touch on the connect first. From our side, what we thought was lacking within the system was a bit more harmony between the bottoms-up types of approaches that were emerging and the global needs and standards and goals and targets that are happening within the space. Our attempt to contribute to that solution was the establishment of a program that we called the Tree Library. So not to get too romantic, but if you think of a well-functioning primary forest, and we're told, as the science is telling us these days, that trees talk to one another. As we are talking to one another about our immediate needs, a well-functioning primary forest talks through its mycelium network. So if one tree needs certain nutrients, the other is suffering from certain scarcities, these systems come to each other's aid. So what we're trying to replicate on our tree library is a bit more of a practical notion of it, is to establish these physical sites around the world, each of which will be highly specialized in terms of what those needs are. So for example, the needs that will appear in an island like Failaka that has suffered from the effects of the first Gulf War and massive environmental degradation will not be the same as another site in Greece that's suffering from coastal erosion and pressures from tourism, will most definitely not be the same for a country like Liberia, where they're having issues around security, peace, but also education for their young women. So having these networks that talk to one another, very much each of which having their own bottoms-up type of program that we're helping to support, but on a global level, connect as humans to where those needs are and actually amplify the efforts of one another. Allah ya'tik al-afiyah, Your Excellency. I know you've been to multiple of these talks just in this fora alone. And I think to a lot of us that are very much action-oriented, we get a little bit tired of discussions and talking about the same thing time and time again, and not enough effective connectivity between all of those different pieces. So the connection piece has to be part and parcel of everything that we're doing so that we can amplify. And it's not about the us, as our own heritage tells us, it's about the we. It's not about the zero sum, it's about how can we hold one another's hand and get across the finish line. Because whether we like it or not, the pressures that we're facing are so large that going at it on our own, it's not going to be enough. The second is on the innovation, and I've touched on it briefly. I think Your Excellency gave brilliant examples. But if we're thinking about what does it take to create an economy for innovation, data is lacking at massive scales all around the world. Even when we have the data, we don't necessarily know what to do with it. And that's where technologies like AI come into fore and to help us connect these sporadic dots. But also be able to have some sense of predictability of where are these things heading. From our side, again, our very small, modest contribution, nowhere near the garage, but we tried to focus a bit more on software innovation. We've created Eon Labs, that's a bit more of our nudge, trying to help encourage innovations that are homegrown in the kingdom, primarily focused on this issue of planetary repair. I think where we lose, CACST and other institutions that have the capability with their labs will most definitely win, and hopefully be able to play a role within this bigger sphere. The innovate, I think, is not only within the companies, but also within the nonprofit space, which I think for too long has been severely underserved. If we're thinking about the metrics of how our nonprofits are being established, the sort of governance systems, whether it's in the need to have 5 to 9 different board members. I'm lucky to be chairwoman of an NGO for women in energy. And even in that brilliant, in my opinion, alhamdulillah, knock on wood, type of experience, I could see the pain in the faces of a lot of our colleagues within that space. Sometimes you have a board of brilliant names that don't necessarily have the time to allocate to it. In a lot of cases, the ability for NGOs, and this is consistent around the world, to be able to deploy the capital where it's needed, this fallacy of focus on minimizing administrative overhead and focus on your program, I don't think is viable in the longer run, because especially in places like the kingdom, you won't be able to attract the right kind of talent to be able to operate your entity. So we're doing a lot of innovations in that front with King Khalid Foundation and other colleagues and collaborators to actually even more so contribute to the impact of NGOs within the environmental space, not just the volume that has dramatically increased after the announcement of the Saudi Green Initiative. And last, but definitely not least, is to have the right kind of governance schemes, the right kind of replicability thinking, let's say. I think this is lacking in a lot of the strategies, the innovations that we're seeing within these spaces, that people don't ask to what end, and if it fits my end, will it be replicable in other places? I'll stop at that. Happy to answer and elaborate if there are any
Thank you.
questions.
It's actually very good in your conclusion, because we really want to also highlight with Engineer Omar, how do we really enable the youth to use these technologies to address some of these critical issues?
Well, I think the first enablement factor for youth is to listen to them. And we recently launched a survey. Mashal is my colleague. She led that effort. Launched a survey around the world of 18,000 people, listening to them around their ways on how to impact society and how to provide basically social impact throughout their journey. So listening to youth is important. This guides us into many things that we do in developing our programs, our policies, and many things that we try to basically enable the youth for. So listening is one. Second is, in my view, is to connect them to the right opportunities, to the right decision makers, to the right programs in capacity building or accelerators of the CACs, or all what's happening in the kingdom. Connection is very important, and I think third is just getting out of their way. Yeah, the third factor is just let them let them sit in the right stages, let them basically do their own path of because we discovered that whatever we do, and this is one of also our research findings, that in many times our perspective into the same thing, into, for example, policy making, our perspectives are different from the younger generation. They think they're equipped with the right policies, and we think that we're lacking some policies. So sometimes we have different views. So getting out of their way, let them do what they want, let them plan their own paths. I think it's very important.
That's very true, Engineer Omar, and I think we also have some of the youth here, and we'd like to hear their perspective on that point and hear from them if they have any questions to our panelists. So we can engage, and maybe if you want to understand a little bit more, we have here a few questions.
Hi, thank you all the panelists for what you have shared. I'm really amazed by that. Tracy from China. I've been in Saudi Arabia for 4 years, and I really appreciate what the kingdom has been done in the past few years, and also I feel the change for this whole kingdom and also the region, and I feel this urgency for the sustainable development as well. My question is quite personal and general. As our moderator just mentioned, I'm representing a youth who are putting ourselves in the industry of energy. I'm actually going to Columbia University for public administration in the energy area. So what I just heard that Miss Mashal are the head of NGO for Women in Energy. I really appreciate that. So I want to know, do you have any suggestions for individuals who are like me, who are just get started in this industry and want to have more suggestions, and maybe in the future I want to put myself back in this region, back in Saudi Arabia. So we'd love to hear more about your suggestions. Thank you.
I don't know if you're lucky. I hope you're lucky, because I've graduated from Columbia as well, from that specific program. So congratulations for getting in.
Thank you so much. I love that. It's my dream program. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my personal encouragement, to be honest, and that was our track record. We were called fools when we were doing it in our grad school years, but both myself and my partner, Noura, happened to be accepted at the same time, and we decided we wanted our journey to go through that education to be a little bit atypical. before we start talking about policies or administrating public entities, you have to understand the underlying sciences. So we chose quite soberly to have a specialization in applied sciences that unfortunately is no longer there. But guess what? The School of Sciences and Arts is still very much so there. My encouragement would be to learn more about the building blocks upon which you're building your policy, because minus having the basics of science literacy in every single one of these domains, especially in the energy sector, be it in terms of our earth resources, understanding the dynamics of our own atmosphere. When I face, for example, a potential climate denier, I know that I can talk to them in confidence because I don't only understand the policy side of it. I was actually doing the calculations to understand that these forcings are actually factual. So these things will give you a lot of assurance as you're charting that pathway forward, especially being a woman. I think when we first entered this space as women tended to be skewing quite male, and the energy sector specifically in the kingdom has been mostly developed compared to the other sectors. That's why there was a need to create a Women in Energy, so you'll find a lot of opportunities when you're back, should you wish to engage continuously with Saudi Arabia. In our case, where a lot of the numbers have been increasing to the point where we needed to raise the level of ambition for our employment goals and targets for women from 30% to 32%, because we've already passed that goal for the Vision 2030. That has not been tracking within the energy sector, where unfortunately that's been around 5%. Although in the Ministry of Energy with the current minister, Allah Yahfadhah, he's been doing incredible work, but the rest of the ecosystem has not been following suit.
Thank you,
And
Your
core to
Highness.
that is
If
the
I-
science. Yeah.
Can I stop you
Please,
there? I'm so sorry.
please,
But
please.
we want to hear more. I see a
Please.
lot of
I
hands
go in
that are raised.
diatribes.
Please, if I can ask everyone to keep it very focused, very straight to the point, to our participants and our panelists.
Yes, my name is Ryan Gibson. I have an initiative called Meaningful Partnerships, which is around the carbon credit industry. What I've noticed in Africa and globally is that there's a gap in the number of companies, especially in the energy sector, that are registering their carbon credits. Usually they develop the complete initiatives such as solar projects, and they don't register those carbon credits as a gap. What is the initiative going forward? I understand the importance of carbon credits globally on a utility basis. We have carbon taxes, which is the stick. Carbon credits is sort of the carrot, but it's also going back into other initiatives and good, which can all pass down all the way through the channel of retail and utility side of things for the usage as a reward even in the future from airlines, et cetera. What type of initiatives do you feel in the kingdom that you're pushing forward now that will help the carbon credit industry gain more utility and credibility in the global market as it is today? I guess the energy sector, yes. I
Sure,
am
happy
the major
to.
stuff, yes.
So I'll try to be brief this time. In the kingdom, there were two efforts that have happened. The first was the establishment of a regional crediting scheme that the PIF and the Capital Market Authority have launched, and that's been mainly trying to get the main champions in kingdom, be it the bigger companies like Aramco, SABIC, our airlines, involved into the trade, especially since each of them have had their own carbon commitments and neutrality commitments by 2050, and some a little bit even more ambitious. But key to that, I think, and this is where a lot of the work is currently happening in the kingdom through the CDNA, specifically to focus on how do you capture that value within Saudi Arabia. So there's the establishment, I think this was announced, you can find more details online, of the GHG crediting scheme or mechanism that allows for efforts that are happening in country to be listed and be traded in a meaningful way. But I think beyond that, to the point of the carrot versus the stick, that's where a lot of our work that our colleagues in the ministry like Yara and others are doing around ESG metrics, and how do you look at this issue a bit more comprehensively and globally that will allow you to go beyond these initial areas of engagement. So I think offset, in my opinion, should always be the choice of last resort. Try to minimize as much as possible, try to divert as much as possible. Should you have no other choice, try to buy the best types of offsets that the market allows you to do so, and ask the right kind of questions while doing that type.
Thank you, Your Highness. Another question? See here.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Tariq Buhlega. Thank you so much for this, and we'd like to thank the Ministry of Economy and Planning and World Economic Forum for the amazing panel and panelists here. I'll keep it simple and short. I don't mind actually hearing from Mr. Najjar or Mr. Khatem. What is actually the secret recipe for foundation and private sector to collaborate to enhance or like boost the sustainable development goals in terms of project or initiative? I know MISC is doing a lot. I know private sector doing a lot, but I want to hear your thoughts on that, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I think it's dedication. That's the first bit. It's having organizations like ours and some of the other companies in this region who are actually truly dedicated to accelerating these types of programs. Just to add to the question about the carbon credits, we're working on projects that will create carbon credits. So we need to make sure that people know about that, make sure it's publicized, and make sure the things that we're doing are out there in the atmosphere so that people know about them, so that we can encourage other companies like ours to do some of the same things. We've also created a sustainable retail coalition. Last year, as part of the COP presidency, we've created a coalition so that we can do just that. It's bringing all of the retail sector together to really focus on how we as a group can work together to push forward some of these initiatives.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see there's someone here, if we can hand them the mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. My name is Wajiul Hussain, and I'm a technology leader and an AI specialist. We're based in Dubai and UAE. I'm here with my Japanese partner. He's here for the first time in the kingdom. So I'll just ask one question for the international projects to be, set up and expand through the infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. I'll touch base on the point His Excellency mentioned about the agri-tech and the technology domain. So let's say if an international or the global project wants to expand in this region with the global collaboration, if you could shed some light on any programs or the collaborative gateways, that'll be appreciated. Thank you.
Go ahead, Your Excellency.
All right, thank you. So great question. And realistically, everything we do is a partnership in one way or another. And we're very welcoming to these kind of partnerships. But it depends on whom is partnering with whom and who the counterpart is in the kingdom. So if it's a startup that wants to enter the Saudi market, the garage could be a great point. And there are other incubators and accelerators as well. But we have an agreement with the Ministry of Investment to offer soft landing to these companies so that they can come and they start operating within 2 days. Giving you access to the labs as well will also give you access to the scientists that know which initiatives are happening under which stakeholder in the country, so you can start piloting or demonstrating to them immediately. But there are other very nice incentives also that have been put into place. So our Special Residency Center a few months ago announced an approval from the Council of Ministers for some new programs. Some of them target VCs, entrepreneurs, scientists and technologists to get a special residency in the kingdom at roughly a one-time fee of $1,000. And they meet the criteria necessary. They start operating in the kingdom like citizens with all the rights in terms of managing a business. So it makes it very easy and attractive. That was part of us investigating what entrepreneurs and VCs need to set up here and to make it easier for them to come, because there's a big movement on trying to create a concentration of talent in the kingdom and in particular in Riyadh today. So if we don't have that proper concentration, the spillover effect and innovation is going to be very easy. So you see a massive growth happening in the VC market in the kingdom. If you look at the numbers back from COVID, they tripled in 1 year and then doubled again and doubled again. So it was very impressive to see that. But I mentioned that the garage has 450 founders. What I didn't tell you is 50% of them are international, coming from more than 54 countries around the world. So you're more than welcome to visit and explore that. And I can help with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Really wish that we can take more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. I would like to express my gratitude to our panelists, their invaluable contribution, and to our audience for their active participation. Your insights that have been shared today reinforce our collective responsibility and capability to drive substantial change. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And maybe one last announcement. There are several events that are happening in Via Riyadh. There are many activations that are by Aramco, MISC Foundation, as well as Research Development and Innovation Authority and NEOM. I encourage everyone to go and visit. It starts around 5 up until probably 11 at night. So I hope you enjoy your visit and your stay, and thank you.
Thank you.